In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found No Proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm your host, Noah Nelson, and welcome to episode 428 of our ongoing exploration of the immersive cosmos. This week on the show, artist Risa Puno joins us to talk about some of their latest work, including the upcoming Group Hug in Philadelphia and Unresolved Rage Game, developed with theater artist Ran Xia, which was recently at Worlds in Play at ASU's Mix Center in Mesa, Arizona. That happened at the top of the year. We go deep into the motivation behind both pieces and how Puno explores emotions through game mechanics in this interview. So you know, as part of the discussion around Unresolved Rage Game, there's some frank talk about the wave of hate directed at Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders that the pandemic unleashed, and that includes some strong language, including the identification of slurs that were directed at Puno themself. Telling you that up front so that you're not caught off guard when it happens. This is a deep talk, thanks to Risa's ability to open up and talk about the real that underpins the work. Something for which we're really grateful for, and I hope you will go there with us today. Before we get into it, however, we do have a few things to tell you about. Oh yes, it's announcement time. No Pro backers, in particular, keep your eye on your inboxes because there are two things headed your way this weekend as soon as the drafts are cleared out of my computer. The first, the pre-sale for the Los Angeles Immersive Invitational's Sunday Showcase, which is hitting on April 21st. Tickets for the preview, matinee, and final performances are going up this weekend for backers, and this is your chance to secure these rare tickets. Just around 150 total will be available for the whole day across all three showings. Before the teams are announced and the roof blows off the Nocturne Theater in Glendale, which is the host venue for the most fun event in all of Immersivedom, produced by After Hours Theater Company in partnership with the Immersive Experience Institute. Sunday, April 21st. Oh yes, you're going to want to be there. You're really going to want to be there. And once we announce the matchups, there will not be any tickets left. So get in on the pre-sale while you can if you're a No Pro backer. Have I been maybe watching a little wrestling again? Yes, I maybe, but only on YouTube. That's not all that's coming to backer inboxes. On Saturday, they will be receiving their ballots for this year's Emmy Awards, the No Proscenium Audience and Editor Awards, that will be presented live via streaming on March 14th. Voting will be open for 2 weeks across the categories this year, with audience awards honoring both specific categories and regions for work that debuted in 2023. The ceremony will also see the presentation of 2 Editor's Choice Awards and a Reader Award, the voting for which will be open to all No Pro readers and listeners starting on Tuesday the 27th. We will have more details about the streaming of this, which will be open to No Pro backers to come check out. Keep your eyes on Patreon feeds and inboxes for all the details. And please, come vote if you're a backer. And we will be releasing all of the nominees. So everyone will know who's nominated. But the voting will be open to backers. So check that out. Just got a little more tabulation to do. The noms came in early this morning, and now I've got lots of work I gotta do. Again, 2 weeks of voting starting on Saturday. Keep your eye on your Patreon feeds and inboxes for details if you're a No Pro backer. Speaking of, this week, we'd like to thank Bela Wyack for becoming our latest backer. This March, we'll be on the march to get our paid membership numbers up. And indeed, the pre sale and the voting, all part of that. Uh, and with all the stuff that's going on, honestly, there's never been a better time to be a backer of NoPro, to exercise your membership in this community. We are giving you more ways to do that. To be part of all that, if you're not already paid up, head over to patreon.com/noproscenium for the hookup. I still dream of getting 1,000 true fans for this. Because if we did, our problems would be solved. Seriously, completely solved. As always, big thanks to our sustaining backers Samuel Mistry, Chris Woolman, Samantha Davison, Eric Shamlin, Elaine, Daryl, John Boulette, Cameo Wood, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Genties, Kurt Collins, Ryan, David Bassick, Richard Ayers, Lonnie Hands-On, Lecker LeCool, the Ministry of Peculiarities, and Jan Budman. Thank you all. And yeah, that's enough for now. Let us get into this fantastic interview with artist Risa Puno. Joining us now is artist Risa Puno, whose work centers on how interactivity and play can help us examine and understand how we relate to one another. That's a direct quote from the website. Longtime listeners might know Risa thanks to 2019's The Privilege of Escape, which was exhibited at Creative Time in New York City, or most recently from Unresolved Rage Game, a project initially developed in collaboration with Ran Xia, and which was featured at ASU's Worlds in Play in Mesa this January, and before that at the Soho Repertory Theater in New York City. Risa hits a milestone this March with their first solo museum show, Group Hug, at the Fabric Workshop and Museum in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Risa, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
This is overdue on my part because I was supposed to break out the equipment at Worlds in Play, and then I just found myself, I lugged all the equipment and didn't break out the equipment. So, Jake, sorry. First, I apologize to Jake for not doing some on the spot. Before we get into Unresolved Rage Game, which an alternate version of which I got to see at Worlds in Play last month, tell us about Group Hug. I'm very curious about it. I'm curious about the image that's on your website of something that looks like it's about to give a very interesting hug to you. Cute feels. Anyway, tell us about this thing. What are you doing at the Fabric Workshop and Museum in Philadelphia?
Sure. Absolutely. So this show is outside of being my first museum solo show, it is the culmination of a 2-year residency that I've been doing remotely actually there. And like FWM has a really collaborative process. And so you work with the studio there and they sort of help you bring your vision to life. And so this project is honestly the most personal that I've ever gone in my work, both in the sense that it's inspired by stuff that's going on in my own family. And it's the first time I'm using Philippine iconography in my work. And so it feels really exciting. I feel incredibly vulnerable. But I think in a good way. Like the idea behind the concept is so so my dad is going through some health issues and it's caused everybody in my family to sort of have to scramble a little bit in terms of um figuring out roles about care because my dad is this honestly, I mean, I'm going to brag, right? Because he's my dad. He's an amazing physician. He's a spine surgeon who has
Oh wow.
90 international and US patents under his belt, right? He's the developer of the world's first polyaxial pedicle screw, and he's just been caring for people his whole career. It's something he loves, and because of his health issues, he's had to retire, and because of that, he is now a patient. And my mom, who was also a physician, is now taking care of him, and now our branch of the family tree, who's usually a very strong branch, which by the way, Puno, my last name, is the Tagalog word for tree, literally. And so our branch of the family Puno is usually the one that gives a lot of support to other people. We're now accepting a lot of support. And so, and also having to support my parents in a way that I haven't had to before. And so everybody's having to sort of reshuffle that, and it's becoming this, there's a lot of collective care that's happening. And I remember after I was on my way home from going to help with this with my dad, and I was doing the New York Times crossword puzzle, and there was a clue that was a many person act of support, and the answer was group hug. And
Mm.
it's like, I was like, that makes sense. And I was like, I want that for the title for my show. And so that's why the show is Group Hug. And so the first thing you do when you enter the exhibition is you have to make a choice. You have to choose either care for or cared for. And which path you choose sort of sets the tone for which role you take in this sort of immersive experience.
Oh wow. Wow. I'm like I'm taken aback in a good way because the thing that I know really like intimately now is like how bad American culture, I'm going to put it as American culture in particular, right, and specifically is at prepping any of us to deal with this material, to deal with the idea of care. There are older traditions, all the cultures that existed before this stupid one, that have ways of prepping folks for this phase of life, and I mean that both as the people who are going to be cared for and the people who are going to be doing the caring, and our particular American culture, our society is almost set up to like not do this at all, like just like nope, we're not going to do it, outsource it, and just extract monetary value from everybody's suffering. And so it's exciting is the wrong word, but like it feels like we need more work thinking about this stuff and activating around it. And so that's just, I don't know, there's a synchronicity here. Risa and I have talked offline because of like stuff, and I don't want to center myself in this one, but like I'm very grateful. I guess what I'm saying is, what I'm actually trying to say is like the way you approach work and the the issues you dive into and the way you slice at the onion of this stuff is always very rich and fascinating, and also just yeah, I'm at a loss for words actually. Like there's right place, right time. Just right place, right time. That's all I can think of at the moment. Right? There's just
Thank you.
something about yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it'll still deliver, hopefully, hopefully on the play that usually shows up in my work. Like, I guess, I mean, I I don't know. I mean, it says it in the press release, so I don't know how people feel about like it's I don't really consider it like a spoiler, because like I said, it's in the press release, but it is technically not on the website description. But I guess so but there are game aspects to it, like in that for me, uh this act of trying to keep up with the issues that crop up with my dad's needs and things like that, and it feels very reactionary and feels very um like we're not planning, right? We're just,
Mm.
there's anxiety, there's it feels chaotic. To me, it feels like a game of whack-a-mole. And honestly, I hate whack-a-mole. I'm terrible at whack-a-mole. And so because of this, we have created essentially a large multi-person whack-a-mole. That is what you get if you choose care for. There is a large multi-person whack-a-mole.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
versus if you choose the cared for path, that is where you encounter the pods that you see me in the photo, those things, and basically those as long as people are willing to work, the work is the playing at the multi-person whack-a-mole. If people are willing to work and care for you, then those pods like sort of form into these like recliner chairs and offer you support. But if people, I guess, when people fail at addressing the needs, right, then they no longer form reclined chairs and um, are not able to offer support, right? It's the idea, it's sort of acknowledging the work that
Oh,
goes into
wow.
the care. And so it's like, it's, even though it's playful, it's acknowledging the work, and also acknowledging like that sometimes if you're the kind of person who is used to giving care, it might, if you decide that day you want to be cared for, accepting that care might be uncomfortable. For example, like if you can hear the people working for you, that might feel uncomfortable, right? You might have to, it might take you a while to settle in and be okay with accepting that support or whatever, right? And I think my hope, my hope is that it can um, help bring about the conversations that I do feel like our culture doesn't make space for, that doesn't, and whether it is more like elder care, whether it is just the idea of collective care at any age or any stage of life, right? I just think this idea that um, the sort of, what responsibilities do we have to each other, and how does um how does caring for others affect our own well-being, and also even just what who do we feel like we have access to rest? Do we feel like we're allowed to rest? You
Yeah.
know, does is that attached to our own feelings of self-worth? Things like that. I mean, the central question is, would you um, would you rather work to care for others, or would you rather have others work to care for you? Is kind of the central question.
Something that, I got to appreciate in theory when people would tell me about privilege of escape, and then I got to appreciate in practice witnessing Unresolved Rage game, and and in how you've illustrated this whack-a-mole versus recliner, or that versus this whack-a-mole and recliner relationship is, you have, and this is the inarticulate thing I was trying to say before, you have this way of not just you have this way of illustrating through structure of action the relationship between social cause and effect, right?
Hmm.
Interpersonal cause and effect, and and drawing that line directly in this idea of like, there's the pods and there's the whack-a-mole, and someone's going to be working the whack-a-mole for the pod to work right. That is mechanically alone, I'm like, that's fascinating. Like, I'm really curious, like, mechanically you're pulling that one off. But then just at the level of like the intellectual exercise of thinking about that, just to illustrate through this act of play, this act of physical, work, uh, something that is emotional work, something that does have, I mean, there's physical labor. Trust me, there's physical labor when it comes to like caring for another person. But the emotional part of it is even more dynamic. And also, do you let people dual wield the whack-a-mole mallets? Because actually, that um, suddenly I want to smash whack-a-mole in a group setting with two mallets so badly. Um,
That's the thing. I mean, first of all, how that works mechanically, I have to give a shout out to the museum, because that's all them.
nice.
Shout out to them and the people they've brought on for the project, like Stuart Everett, our programmer, as well as like all of the staff and all of the contractors that they've brought on, to, I mean, including like Hannah, who's sewed every one of those leaves for the things. I mean, there's so many people who's like, I mean, Franco, the project coordinator, who's everybody's like blood, sweat, and tears, hopefully not literally, that has gone into the into making that happen. So first of all, that's how that works, is there's like a whole army of people behind that, and like, yeah, 2 years of development. But yes, I do think that um I do believe in the language of games in general. I think that I do think that every game has its own language, and I think games in general, the way I always think of them is they are challenges that you willingly take on, right? And so I think, and play in general, right? There's a freedom that people have when they step up into a playful experience, that that you that you can use, that I like to use as an artist. Like, it's that's why I like to think of it as, I like to think of games and play as my primary medium. Also possibly my love language, I'm not sure. um, but yeah, and I think that there's a structure to that, I think, and a language, and I think it definitely, there is a cause and effect that you can show, but that has been a big discussion with that project, is how to get that across, how to get that, specifically that causality across with it. And um, that is, I mean, the people who experience it, they will be the judges of whether or not we were successful.
I will say, like, as someone who does like guacamole because of just the thwacky nature of it, I think the people who choose that will probably enjoy themselves, and whether they'll get the point or not, like that's up to like maybe how far they throw themselves into whacking the moles. But
Oh,
yeah.
and to answer your question, if you want, I mean, the thing is, there will be several mallets, I believe 4 available, so it all depends, it's how many people come through at the same time as you. Also, whether or not you feel like sharing, if you get there first and you wanna grab 2. I mean, I was actually thinking, I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen if there's already 4 people, whacking away and somebody wants to come and start, like, bopping it with their hands, like, I mean, I'm like, nobody's gonna stop them. I mean, that's uncomfortable, but if they want to do it because they want to lend a literal hand, like, more power to them. I kind of think, like, there was a project I did in 2000, I mean, I did it first in 2008 and then again in 2013, 2014, called no, it was called The Course of Emotions. It was a mini golf course, where playable mini golf course where each hole presented an emotional obstacle to overcome, and one of the holes was despair, and it was a literal par infinity, because it was like, there was a cylinder, and the hole that you had to putt to was at the top of this cylinder. So, like, you can't putt to that, because to me that's despair, right? Like, you just
Yeah.
can't get there.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite, like, emergent behaviors that they came about was, people would often either borrow a putter, or 2 people would take their putters and, like, drag the ball up the side and into the hole, which I think just goes to show sometimes you need a little help to get through despair. That made sense to me. That tracked, right? And so, the idea that you might have extra people who just want to help and lend an extra hand in a game about collective care. They just want to help out and care too, right? Like, that to me, I'm like, yeah, get in there, care some more, right? I think something that is, especially present in that work, but that shows up in a lot of my work, and honestly, kind of a lot of my life, is this. There's this pre-colonial Philippine concept called kapwa, and it um it essentially, it's about, like, a shared identity, or like togetherness, but at the heart of it is this, sort of moral belief that we have a duty to care for each other, um, the way we care for ourselves, right? And
Mm.
so, if somebody is just feeling that kapwa spirit and just wants to get in there, I'm I I I'm all for it, in whatever way they want to do that.
Turning to a different set of emotions, and a different game, Unresolved Rage game, which
Mhm.
is about what it says on the tin. So the version that I got to witness at Worlds in Play, that was a modified spin-off beta test you were trying out. But I'm hoping you can actually, much like you just sort of did for Group Hub, if Group Hug, I may or may not edit that. I'm hoping you can take us through this one from the start, because there's a lot of juice in this one.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. As you said, this was first developed as part of. Well, actually, I don't know if you said. I'm going to say. Um, this was first developed as part of Soho Repertory Theater's Writer Director Lab with Ran Xia. And when we did it, actually, you know what? Hold on. I I actually have our manifesto. I have our manifesto right here, and if you want,
Go for it.
I can just read it if that's
Rock
yeah.
and
So
roll.
this was this is kind of this was where we started. This is what we wanted. This was our goal for the project, and we actually kept coming back to this. So this is where it came from. So this is our manifesto. We are full of rage. We are fed up with being your good girls, your model minorities. We are not your nerdy sidekicks, your hypersexualized geishas, your tiger moms, your wizened mystics. We are far more powerful than we've allowed ourselves to be. We are done with making ourselves small. We refuse to stay silent as you use us to oppress others, or keep our heads down as you cast us in the role of your scapegoat. We will no longer make you feel comfortable with your racism or sexism. Fuck your bootstrapping. We commit to being difficult, to being militant, to being messy. We reject the obligation to overachieve, and we demand the luxury of mediocrity. We take pride in our complexity, our flaws, our whole humanity. We stake our claim as the main characters of our story. And so basically, Unresolved Rage Game is, or it was at least, a sort of immersive theatrical experience that was based on tabletop role playing game, which if for any listeners who aren't familiar, the most famous TTRPG, tabletop role playing game, is Dungeons and Dragons is the most famous one. But so we like TTRPGs because of their collective storytelling aspect of it. We do not like Dungeons and Dragons because of the whole, like common trope of you go in and kill everybody and take all their loot. Like that's not really, the whole like a lot of the colonization and imperialism and all that stuff is just not really not really my thing. But the vulnerability and the and what can happen at a table with your group was something that I was really interested in. And we wanted to take that experience and see if we could turn it into a theatrical experience. And so through Soho Rep, we developed something where we wrote a game. Like Ran was more on the like world building and scenario sort of stuff. I was more sort of in the like mechanics sort of thing, and wrote an actual like a, a TTRPG, like a role playing game with our own mechanics, with stats like rage, confidence, acceptance, uh, you know, um, and um, and basically and so what we did at the end, like for our workshop, whereas some other people had like, like a play that 65 people saw on a stage, instead we had our audience was four people, four people. Was thank goodness Soho Rep let us do this. It was four people on the stage, each at their own table, and they were all Asian femmes, and they were the players, like the actually playing this game that we wrote. We had scenarios for it, and then we had actors playing the people that you encountered along the way, the racist and or sexist players, the characters, who were essentially hitting them with racist and or sexist microaggressions, right? And then each of those players had like a system admin standing next to them who was like a white and or mask like person who was acting as a live tutorial. And they had sort of the impossible task of representing this like limiting and oppressive system, but also somehow keeping the players safe within it too. So that was a tricky task for them as well. And so we had 6 cast members, 4 audience members, an amazing lighting designer, amazing stage manager, board op, all that. Like it was like a theatrical experience for 4 audience members, and it was, and I was running it as the game moderator, and it was an incredibly intimate experience. It was very difficult to figure out how do we how do we do this in a way where, you know, I mean, because there's literal rage triggers in the game. It's like we we make people mad, right? And how do we do this in a way where we can help people um, articulate and unpack their rage, but we're not re-traumatizing them, right? Like so, we definitely wanted to create a tool um, for people to be able to do that because for us, rage is an emotion that is something that is a little bit, sometimes difficult for us to acknowledge and or express. And so, which is actually reflected in the mechanics of our game. Each character has a rage profile, and that is based on whether or not she acknowledges and or expresses her rage. And so that's the thing. And so that's it was tricky to find that line of how to do that, and thinking a lot about um how to set up that experience. Both, so there was a lot of research in TTRPGs, also with LARP, about like how to prime people, also like the sort of thinking about things like de-rolling and aftercare, and how to sort of bring people down and debrief them, and just yeah, and sort of thinking about like what what does it mean, right? Like what would it mean, uh like even just like how do we end the experience, right? Like how do you um because when making games about like shitty things like oppression, right? It's like, do you make it about the world as it is, or do you make it about the world as you hope it will be, right? And I tend to be the former. I tend to not, I don't, I personally don't like to act like I've figured, I don't like to act like everything is solved, I like to just sort of present things how, at least how I see them. And so I wanted to m- I wanted to give people the sense of an exhale, but not the feeling like, oh, it's we've solved it, Um, like what Ren and I talked about was like, yeah, that sense of exhale, that yes, like the acknowledgement that our rage is unresolved, but like letting the other Asian femmes who are playing, letting them know that like you're not alone. Just the acknowledgement that that we see you, and that you're not alone in this. And that was kind of what we were thinking about with that original version, and so like the end of that script ends with like a sort of um it was like thinking about like what is a happy ending in that sense. And it's like it's for all the honestly all the shit that's going down at the end, like all the I mean, I there's like it's like a ridiculous scene because that one is like set in, like there's like a cruise ship and it's a wedding, and it's like, I mean, there's all kinds of nonsense that's happening at the end of that one, and it's like it just fades away, right? Because it's like that to me would be a happy ending, is for like all those people to just not fucking matter, right? And so it's like they fade away, and it ends with like a sort of like breathing exercise, and like um and then it's like the thing that they get to do at the end is they get to because like a lot of them are like playing with sort of toxic like there's special features that each character has, but some of the special features are really kind of fucked up, like things like cringe coddle, where it's like you fawn at someone's like racist or sexist microaggression, but like in order to do that, like you're not fighting back, you're doing it by like laughing at it, um and so we wanted to give people a way to like sort of shed these characters. And so at the end they get to give a gift to their character, like a new special feature. And it's an option to it was a way for people to think about like either what they hope their character could be, but for a lot of people is thinking about what they really need, right? A lot of times people are really just giving gifts to themselves. um, and then also at the end they get to introduce themselves to the group, and also say whether or not they're anything like the character they played. So it's a very different tone than the one you saw. um, but it's very much like the sort of themes of that one are very much like sort of sisterhood and support, and like sort of community solidarity.
And I imagine that because of the actual structure of the game, that because you mentioned cringe coddle and there were a couple other moves that the characters had, that was the thing that in witnessing the other scenario, which was meant to be played by people who are not Asian femmes,
Mhm.
but who were taking on the roles of Asian femmes inside a different scenario, using the same mechanics. What was fascinating to me was thinking of, navigating an emotional landscape, a social landscape, the same way you would approach a tactical fight in a TTRPG that was born of like wargaming, and that it was move sets, and it was about the mechanics, the way you structured the mechanics, so there were visible ways, quite literally visible ways, that the pressures mounted or what was at risk, what was at stake, and then the moves people had to do, and knowing there was a trade-off between, if you made this move, you were putting this aspect of your character at risk. And just in witnessing it, it started to create in me this own sense of like distance, right? Of getting to step back and thinking about almost like the emotional user interface of reality. And the thing I've been wondering since watching that alternate version was, had you always been thinking in those kind of terms, or even before? Because I don't fully know your background playing tabletop role playing games, but like this almost, from a game design standpoint, it's almost like a tactical emotional RPG. And and particularly like that there were emotional reactions, right? Like there are things in games where it's like, if this happens to you, then your character automatically does that, right? And you built that in. But instead of it being like, well, if someone moves on your left side, and then your shield thing activates and you can get two moves to this, instead I was like, yo, if someone says this crappy thing, then to anyone around you, you're going to be triggered and need to take action, and then you've got one of two ways of dealing with the action. Like, that's how your mechanics were working. And like, had you thought about emotional reactions in those terms before messing around with a lot of TTRPGs? Or like, when did that conceit kind of come to you and become sort of the grounding point for this?
Well, I think, I mean, emotions and gamifying emotions is like, I mean, that's like my whole That's like everything, right? Like I feel like whether it's in mini golf or whack-a-mole or anything, I think putting um emotions within the language of games is like my is like my favorite. It's like everything, right? That's everything for me. So I think putting it in the terms of TTRPG specifically, I mean, I think it's kind of just thinking about like, um, yeah, I think it's just for me, the language of whatever game is like what I'm trying to search for. So with TTRPGs, the reason why I think it fits so well for this is because, at least for me, I personally find so many TTRPGs limiting and oppressive, just generally, like their rule sets, you know? Like, I mean, I'm a slow reader, so it took me 2 weeks to get through the player's handbook of 5e. And 5e is supposed to be the lightest version of D&D. So
Oh, it takes me. I'm a fast reader, and it takes me forever to get through a role playing game book. Particularly, like the older I get, the harder it is. Like they are, as a rule, not written all that well. And once you've read one, you feel like you've read all of them. So you're just like, really, I'm gonna go through this again. Like how are you? Ugh, yeah.
right?
I
It's like
looked
it
for them, and I can't read them anymore.
right? And the thing is, and it they seem like, and also there's a lot of the culture that feels very like gatekeepy and stuff like that. And it seemed honestly perfect. I was like, this vibe is perfect for a limiting and oppressive system and to just like make people feel like they are stuck in a box. I was like, this thing of making people feel like they have to be good Asian girls. I was like, this is the perfect game for that. Right. And so, and this idea of rage, this idea of this very contained thing and like not being able to, because it's this idea of like feeling like you can't access this because of all these rules, right? It's like this game is great for that, you know, this game format, right? And so thinking about like how to gamify that, TTRPGs in general just seems like the right format. And so then thinking about, okay, like what are the stats for that? I mean, since it's about rage, it makes sense to go with emotions, right? And so then it's thinking about what are the stats that affect, what are the things related to rage, right? It's like, I mean, the hardest part about it was, if rage is something that is hard for, like, I mean, I can't speak for all Asian femmes. I can, like, it was Ran and me talking through stuff, right? And so for us, for the two of us, right, it was like, um if that is something that is sometimes hard for us to express or even acknowledge, I mean, it was rough. I mean, like our Soho Soho Rep writer director lab was like a year long, and I was sitting there for a lot of it being like, we have not had enough fucking therapy to be able to write the mechanics for this. I don't know. I don't know why I can't access rage. I don't know what I'm scared of. I don't know why. Like, I don't know why I don't speak up. Like, I don't know. There's so many times where I either don't realize I'm angry or realize I'm angry later, or I know I'm so fucking angry, but I don't speak up, even though I technically have nothing to lose in this moment. Why do I not say anything? You know, and it takes so much to try and pick that apart. And it was like, you know, through so many conversations with lots of people really, and sort of like soul searching to sort of figure out like what are the mechanics behind that. And so for our game, it's things like confidence, right? And every time you take on rage, your confidence covers your rage. And once your rage exceeds your confidence, that's when you um, explode or implode, um, depending on your rage profile. And the thing is, it's so weird because the more, like, I really do feel like these mechanics are reflected in real life, and I this has happened. This has like literally happened um to me in real life. Like when when it's like I'll be getting dismissed over and over and over by somebody, right? And it's like I'll be like rolling my rage die, right? And it's like in our game, it's like when somebody triggers your rage, you first react internally before you can react externally. And the internal reactions were loosely based on this book, The Case for Rage by Dr. Misha Cherry. And it's like there's deny, replace, suppress, and validate, right? And it's like if you deny, it's like you can block all of them. But in order to do that, you have to, in a really fucked up way, find a way to convince yourself to tell yourself that you brought it on yourself. That is the only way you can block all of the rage, right? If otherwise, if you replace, you can say it's not their fault, but you can only block one. You have to take on the rest, right? And rage is a D4. And then otherwise, you can suppress, which means you're taking on that rage, right? Or you can validate, which suppress and validate, you're still taking it on, but the difference is with suppress, this is sort of more of a role play choice. It's like with suppress, you have to convince yourself, like you have to say out loud to the group and to the GM, like, what do you tell yourself to suck it up? Whereas validate, you get to answer the question, how do you know your rage is valid? Also, validate takes less energy than suppress because it doesn't take very much energy to say, yeah, that's fucked up. My rage is valid because that's fucking racist. Like it doesn't take a lot of energy. It is about resource management because it's like the nice thing is that it also helps acknowledge, like, because a lot of these things in real life are happening, but it's happening sort of reflexively, right? And you're not thinking about all of the energy that you're spending on this stuff in every moment, right? Like I will come out of things exhausted and shaking in real life, and I didn't really think about why. And now, because of this game, it's like I now know why. And honestly, I no longer feel crazy because it's like uh, and I don't use that word lightly. Like I'm not using that as hyperbole. Like there's times where I doubted myself, which again, that's like my rage covering my confidence, because I didn't realize that's what it was. I didn't realize I was carrying rage. And it's been really validating to talk to people who've played this game because they've told me that like they've thought about it every day since because it's helped them unpack moments in the same way, And I think that's something that has been really not just validating but inspiring, and made me feel, since the main goal really was to for this to be a tool to help people, who like with similar social identities, and so the fact that it could do that just was really heartening, and continues to be really heartening.
You mentioned that the players have found themselves being able to use the way the game articulates this experience to like help them navigate. Have have you found people who have been in witness roles or in the ancillary roles, has it had the same impact, or has it been reported to you that it's had the same impact for them?
I think so. I mean, I from what I've heard, I mean, it hasn't been um, seen that many times, right? Because like in at Soho Rep, we didn't have an audience. We actually, for the dress rehearsal, we let the Soho Rep staff come watch because just so that they could um, just to see what they had supported. We got the consent of the players for the dress rehearsal, but otherwise, the other four, um, like performances, playtests, games, or whatever, didn't have an audience. And so, what we did at Worlds in Play, because after that we started thinking, at the dress rehearsal, the Soho Rep, some of the people who saw it were like, you were like, that was actually really entertaining. And we were surprised because I was like, do you really want to watch like 3 hours of other people play a game? Like I don't know, but they thought it was actually really entertaining and funny. Because we try to make it, like we have like cringe coddle, white whisper. And I mean, I mean, as with a lot of my work, I try to I think disarmingly playful is what is sometimes used in like, like press releases and stuff. Because that's the vibe that I try to go for, is the line I try to walk. And so um we did try to infuse it with a decent amount of humor, just so that it wasn't so painful for people. And so I just didn't know it would be entertaining for anybody outside of the circle. And apparently it was. And so we were thinking about, like, okay, would it have value to people outside? I mean, the thing is, I think that there are already a lot of tools for white people to be better white people. Like, honestly, and that was something I was pretty adamant about. Like, um, honestly, when, like, at the height of the pandemic, um, I don't know, there was like, uh there were a couple of incidences. Like, there was some woman who, like, threw a mask at me and said, "I'm gonna fucking kill you, fucking chinks ruining everything for everyone." And there was some other white lady who tried to, like, hit me in the face. And I mean, honestly, this stuff really messed me up. And I was yeah, I mean, honestly, I was really uh emotionally really messed up at the time, and I was looking for resources. And this, at the time, there were all these, I don't even know if you remember, there were all these, like, bystander trainings that were like, all these,
Huh.
bystander trainings that were being offered for people. um but then this company that offered that decided to offer one for people who are the targets of that, violence. And um the so I went to it, and they just sort of recycled their material, and I found it, honestly, just kind of re-traumatizing. And not like, they it was clear that it was not really for me. It was clear that it was more just for the bystanders. And I was so upset. It felt like everybody was like, "Oh, stop AAPI hate." It was like, it felt like, of all the times, like, people, we were not invisible, but there was still more resources for white people to be better white people than there were for people, for, like, for actual, like, Asian people and Asian Americans. And I was just like, are you kidding me? And so for this, I was for a long time pretty adamant that I didn't want to make something for non-Asian and or non-femmes. I was pretty anti that. But it was actually through I actually got into an argument with my partner, who is a white man. And I remember getting, um I got so angry. And at one point I was like, "See," I was like, "this is what happens. This is what I mean by my rage covers my confidence." And it was like, through the language of my game, it was like he immediately understood what I meant. And it actually, like, made made that go so much faster. And, like, he and I realized, the having that having that shared understanding actually took a lot of the emotional labor off of me. Having him understand the mechanics of that
Mm.
helped take the emotional labor off of me. And so we saw that maybe there was actual value to Asian femmes if non-Asian and or non-femmes had exposure to these mechanics. And so we thought, and also, since a for audience uh, thing is unproducible, we were like, maybe if we come up with a version that can actually support an audience, maybe we can use that to fund a private version for Asian femmes. So um, that's when the non-Asian and or non-femme version, because, like, we didn't want to make an audience version where Asian femmes were playing, because that it's such a vulnerable experience. We didn't want to make our community feel exploited. But we realized, and also, it's like different when you're actually playing, right? And so we were like, well, what if we let non-Asian and or non-femmes play as Asian femmes, as characters, right? So they're playing as us, and then the audience represents the dominant group, because the dominant group is like one of the stats is acceptance in the eyes of the dominant group. So what if the dominant group is represented by the audience and we find a way to make it participatory and um, try to find a way to make the audience complicit in it too. Like that to me, like, I guess sort of ethically made it feel like I could swallow that.
Yeah.
Um, and then use that to fund the private version. And so that's what we were sort of testing out, dipping our toe in that for Worlds in Play.
Well, and some of the mechanics, involved, you mentioned before, you phrased it as like a role playing choice between suppress or validate the rage. But if I remember correctly in the mechanics, and you would know if I remember this or not, like the validating move though does put the acceptance trait at risk, right? Like there's
Mm.
a no, it doesn't. I'm,
No,
I'm,
it's what happens after that. So you have your
oh,
internal reaction, and then
it's
after
the
that,
right.
it's the external reaction.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
acceptance, nobody knows what goes on inside your head,
Right,
but external reactions are based on, honestly, they're based on trauma responses. It's uh, freeze, flee, fight, or fawn. And so if you some depending on your rage profile and what has happened, you know, in the past, usually at this point in the story, only one character has access to fight. It's the person who can acknowledge and express her rage. And yes, fighting um, almost always costs you acceptance with the
right.
dominant group.
Yeah, I remember there was some interrelated relationship between the internal and the external, but like it's a it's a hermetically sealed system. Like everything feeds back into it. It's like it gets into there, and then that there's a meter that happens. But the
Yeah. Oh,
thing,
and to be clear, fighting in our game is it's asserting yourself,
yeah,
confronting someone, or standing up for someone else.
yeah. There's something you said at the start of this about games being your creative language, and in so many ways this game has created a language for navigating this, and so it makes this emotional reality, and so it makes sense that as other people get exposed to the game, they start picking up on the language, right? That there's that, and it made me think of a Boal quote, because I'm in the middle of reading Theater of the Oppressed, and this idea of like when you start to learn a language, and there's all kinds of languages, not just idiomatic ones, like you're starting to kind of get a real knowledge of something as opposed to kind of being more at a distance from it. So there's just a lot of this way in which this approach you have of articulating through mechanics emotions, and seeing how they interrelate. Like I'm really glad you took us through like that structure, because it feels like it's a thing that actually happens. Like there's like there's almost like a metaphysical truth to what you've laid down with this thing. Um, yeah, I don't know how to articulate beyond that. It's just it feels like universally true in a fundamental way. Like I know that as a witness, I couldn't help, and I latch onto systems. So, I think a lot of, folks who have gaming tendencies are like, we have systems brain, like we latch onto it,
Mhm.
but I couldn't help but start to filter like some experiences, even ones that didn't involve rage, just the idea of emotional reactions and how was that, working through an entire system, like, but not just like for me, but like for other people, like, oh, what is going on? Like, it's almost like getting like a little window into someone else's soul, like, and
Mhm.
it's not a perfectly crystal clear. It's not like I can just like hold the mechanics up and like see someone's heart, but like knowing that these kind of dynamics are going on inside folks, right? God, that's really
Yeah.
inarticulate. I don't.
No, I mean um that's part of the hope, right? Is that it's like to understand things, to well, first of all, to just even understand that like somebody who, like, for example, a character who is a people pleaser, like one of our, like, to understand that a person who is a people pleaser, like one of our characters was, right? To understand how somebody like that can still be grappling with rage, right? How somebody who is a very sunny personality um, still can be grappling with a lot of rage. You know, she might not be acknowledging that as rage, but it's something that um, she can be taking on, and it can be covering her confidence, and she can be very close to exploding, and not and be struggling because of it, right? And so, but all you might see on the outside is like a really, really tight smile. In fact, the more that she's, um, I think in the version you saw, the special feature she has is called toxic positivity, and so, um, so it's the kind of thing that, whether for some people it makes them rethink their own toxic positivity, if that's something they identify with. For some people it makes them think about people they know like that, and might help them empathize, whether that helps them create space for someone like that to be able to open up and acknowledge their rage, or whether it helps just them um, give that person a little grace if they uh, notice that it is a little bit toxic, and you know uh, it just helps them understand it. Whatever the case may be, right? But yeah, I think that is. I mean, I it is tricky because it's like I I think with all TTRPGs, uh, it's like the idea that like, oh, you play a barbarian, all barbarians are strong but not smart. It's like you don't want to reduce human beings, like especially if you're talking about real things, you don't want to reduce people to stereotypes or archetypes or whatever. And so that is a tricky thing, because there are some uh it's like the person who is like there's like a literal special feature called militant minority. Like there's things where like we sort of wink at those those um stereotypes, but um but at the same time, like, acknowledge that because those exist, people people see you that way, right? And it affects your acceptance level.
Yeah.
um and so um I think it's just it's a way of like those mechanics, we do hope it helps people see a little bit into people like us, into other people, even other people not like us, right? It's just thinking about a little bit about how we all operate, but you know but also it's because I think, um again, I mean, I'm definitely not going to pretend I know what all Asian femmes experience, but it is pretty remarkable that like um that Ren and I have very, very different backgrounds and very different upbringings. Like Ren grew up in Shanghai, right? And is here on an O1 visa. Like she does not identify as Asian American. Like she is Asian. She does not even identify as an immigrant, right? Whereas like I grew up in Kentucky, so I'm not even Asian American. I'm Asian American. It's like, and so like, yet because we face a lot of the same stereotypes and a lot of the same oppression, and like I think I mean, hello, like the person who threw a mask at me, like called me a racial slur. I mean, I'm not Chinese. I'm Filipinx, right? Like that's like, but I get called the same racial slur, right? And so it's like because we because we get called the same racial slur, it's like um there are a lot of similar things that we face, even though our cultures and upbringings are so different, right? And so I think it's like even though uh we are essentially we're not a monolith, we do face a lot of similar things.
There's that split between the person who you are and who you know yourself to be, and the personal biography and the cultural history that you have and and then there's what people are running around with the model in their head that they're imposing
Mhm.
upon you. And the 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 one thing about games that when you delve deep enough into them, you, with the idea of roles, with the idea of just the way, like there's the persona, there's the mask, there's like the character class that you are, there's the type, but then there's like, well, who are you personally versus the role you're filling in the party, even in like the party design when they think about a tactical role playing game where it's like, well, who's the tank and who's the DPS, like these sorts of things, like you have this function in a group that's different from who your identity is, and then you start, and that's in this like silly fictive thing, and you start to see how that can get reflected back in the things society is trying to do to you and is being enforced by everybody else, and the person you really are, and the tension points where those meet. And the language of games gives us for that in a particularly unique way. And the degree to which the grammar you've made, the verbs you've invoked, like this particular dialect of gaming you've made with this piece, also really illustrates the power of games to go so far beyond what someone who has a very casual relationship with games might ever imagine. So it was a real joy to see at that level, like this thing at work, and to start to get a visceral, grokkable sense of like how you approach designing and making one of these languages. So this makes me excited to see any other work of yours I get to like come across. And I'm truly I'm just grateful knowing that that group hug show is out there in the world, and I've got this feeling it's gonna like help a lot of people who are struggling with the same issues, or maybe also prep some people to like kind of to have a tool, to have a metaphor handed to you before you face the issues of having to like care for someone in your family. Like, I mean, that's what a culture is supposed to do. It's supposed to give us the tools before we face the actual situation. And you're out there making those tools. So thank you
I
for that,
hope
Risa.
so.
You
I hope
are.
so. I hope so. It's open. It'll be open March 1st through July 21st. So hopefully, yeah, I
Yeah.
hope it does. I hope it makes it I hope it normalizes that conversation, just makes it something that anybody can talk about at any time.
Yeah. Well, Philly gang, go check it out. I know there's a lot, and come down from New York squad. So I think a lot of people. I mean, I wish
It's
I could get.
easy. It's like a 90-minute train ride.
Oh man, it was so nice out there. All right. Well, Risa, thank you for taking time on a Tuesday evening with us. I know it's like getting late there, so I'll let you rock and roll. But seriously, thanks for this.
Thank you for having me.
Once again, I want to thank Risa for being our guest on the show this week. Check out their work via the show notes. If you're in Philadelphia, definitely go check out Group Hug. Whack some whack-a-moles for me. Take care of some people that way. And if you do wield, please let me know. Please DM me about that. It is going to be a very busy weekend here in the Nelson household. I don't actually like to call it that. Anyway, in my household, a busy weekend in a couple of different ways. Here in NoPro headquarters, there we go. That's what we like to say. Yes, very busy weekend in NoPro headquarters. Also, some stuff going on the household side, and because getting the pre-sale up for the Invitational, which I'm super stoked about, and really looking forward to telling everyone about all of the teams that are going to be playing in this year's Invitational. Why aren't we doing that right away? Well, we're waiting on some marketing material from everybody so that we can get everyone's smiling faces and company logos involved. So we want to do it up right. But that just gives us the opportunity to let everyone who is a backer get in on the action before we unleash the floodgates, and then people start going like, why, oh, why didn't I buy a ticket to this? Those who have been to the Invitational before can attest it is really fun. It is some of the most fun you can have. And this year, the tickets are actually less expensive than they were in 2022. The ticket price has been brought down deliberately just because we want people to have fun and to like be there. So they were a little pricey in 2022, and this year we're able to make them a little bit less pricey. And now that everyone knows how much fun it is, we know that it's gonna sell right through. So come on down. And then all the Emmys stuff. Ooh, yeah, a lot of work there. Things are picking up. Things are getting interesting. Had a really great meeting with Catherine and Eric, my co-founders in the Institute, about some of our long-term plans, the things that are happening beyond the next stage, which is also in the planning mode right now. Looking forward to being able to announce dates and venue on that, hopefully pretty soon. Just got to clear one more hurdle with our venue, and then we'll be ready to go. And yeah, there's there's all kinds of things cooking right now, and conversations we're going to have, and some stuff that's kind of like quiet and closer to behind the scenes over here, and other stuff which will be big and loud and we're making so much noise about. And all of this really is made possible by all of you and standing by us. And my ability to work on this stuff is funded through the Patreon, and just super grateful for that. It's a particularly awkward time right now. Awkward, scary time. If you follow independent media in general, like I do pretty closely, you'll know that Vice.com, which had a lot of issues over the years in this way and that way, but also was home to a lot of really incredible journalists. It's just going away. It's just completely disappearing. They're gonna stop doing their website, and no one knows how long that website's going to stick around. And let me tell you, that is horrifying in so many ways. Um, Not the least of which is just the way we lose these archives possibly forever. I've been doing a lot more research than I usually get to do because of the class I'm teaching up at CalArts. And the thing I keep finding that's really depressing is you'll be digging around and find out about a show or an event, and there just will not be anything around anymore. The review that was written in, say, The Guardian in the UK, or an article that was in a subsidiary of The Atlantic for something uh, just isn't accessible anymore. That archive was never loaded up onto the internet, or that website was mothballed by a publication. And we're going to see that happen with Vice. And I don't ever want to see that happen to what we've been building for the past 10 years. We know, if anything, I want to make things more accessible. So it's not just, you got to go on Google, which is getting harder to use as well. So part of the idea later in the year of migrating the site from Medium to Ghost will also be to make it more accessible, easier to search, and to just start prepping all of this as if it was a real archive, and working with folks who are working on real archives of Immersive. Um, Laura Hall's got a project that she's working on right now, and we're going to be helping out as we can. And I feel comfortable mentioning that here because she's kind of asking around for some more and more publicly on social media for the project, and so hopefully we'll get Laura on the show at some point to talk about it, and also we're going to be figuring out what formal ways we're going to be helping as we can. Turns out, man, you got to get lawyers around for all kinds of things. You just want to do good work. You just want to help everybody out, but you got to button everything up and cross T's and dot I's and not make the joke about dotting T's and crossing I's because they don't like that. So there you go. All right, that's enough for now. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone in LA at the Invitational in April. So much stuff going on. I hope a lot of you are going to have fun at the NYC Immersive Weekend that was put together by Patchwork. I think they were down to like 2 tickets. I didn't do an ad at the top of this one because I think they're down to 2 tickets right now. So they're pretty much sold out. They might be sold out by this point. I heard a couple of tickets left. But that's coming up at the top of March. And of course, beginning April, Without Walls, which you're going to hear all about next week. Uh, One, because their preview day is on the 29th, and then on March 1st, the very next day, the podcast is going to drop, and we have Amy and Mia from La Jolla Playhouse to talk about WoW, and you're gonna get the information. If you like to absorb the listings by having people talk them to you, well, guess what? You're gonna get that. And WoW is coming up at the top of April. We're just kicking off. Oh, and hey, check this out, and I'll put this one in the show notes as well. Uh, Third Rail Projects is doing something at South by Southwest this year. So if you're at South by Southwest, go check that out. If you can still get a reservation for it, maybe by the time you hear this, they'll be gone. Sometimes that's how that happens, but that's coming up. So just a it's a good time to be in immersive land. What can I say? Oh, I can say that, and I just did. All right, it's very late, and I think the caffeine is holding on to my heart too strongly. I need to go. I should go get some sleep. Let's do the credits. The associate producer of this podcast is Parker Sella, who we just talked to like 2 hours ago. The music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society and solo to the podcast. I talked to Chris like last month. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro last week. The No Pro podcast is written, edited, hosted, produced, and mixed by yours truly. I'm Noah Nelson. I talk to myself all the time. And until next time, I'll see you at the show.